Welcome to the Landmark Theater's Q&A podcast. In this podcast, you will hear from writer-director Kenneth Lonergan, moderated by Deadline Hollywood's Pete Hammond, as well as actor Casey Affleck, moderated by film critic Leonard Maltin, as they discuss Manchester by the Sea, recorded at the Landmark in West Los Angeles.
Congratulations this week especially. I didn't mention it in my intro there, but you have won so many awards, from the Gotham Awards to the New York Film Critics Awards to the National Board of Review. So many awards already for this film. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Really has been an incredible week for Manchester by the Sea, which sort of started its journey at the Sundance Film Festival. Did you have any idea when you premiered there that this would have this big an impact?
No.
No?
No, I mean, we liked the movie, and I was excited to see it with an audience in Sundance, and you hope the movie's going to do well and that people will like it, but I'm not a prognosticator. I don't know what's going to happen to anybody.
You don't know, but sometimes you enter when and you've done 3 films now, and not a huge output, but you sort of know when something's connecting to an audience, and that's what your films do. You write very human characters.
Oh, well, thank you. But I mean, you try to connect, and I think you can feel in an audience, you're sitting watching the film, whether people are into it or not, or whether they're connecting to it. But yes, I mean, it's a really nice feeling. That's why you do it in a way. I mean, not so much to win prizes, but to really kind of connect people to each other and to your work, and see the world through the audience's eyes, and vice versa, I guess.
I guess I just want to thank you on behalf of the audience of writing human characters and stories about people.
Well, thanks. I actually really like doing it, so there's nothing to thank me for.
But not a lot of people are doing it now, and you know how difficult it is to get these kind of movies made.
I think so, but I think there's an appetite for them. I think if you look at the films now that are getting a lot of attention, there's a lot of really good films out there. A lot of films made by individuals, not by committees, and increasing support for those kind of movies. I think the public really likes good movies. I don't agree with the self-fulfilling Hollywood prophecy that people only want to see the same blockbuster spectacle movie over and over again. I think if they were given the chance, people would go see all kinds of movies, and I hope that the films that are getting some attention this year will convince some of the financial entities to back more films like this one, and Moonlight and La La Land, and just Loving, and all these really terrific movies that are out there right now.
So what was it about this one? This one came to you, I think, from Matt Damon, maybe from Casey. How did you get involved directly into doing this film?
Well, the screenwriting element the whole thing started with Matt Damon and John Krasinski, who had the idea for the film and brought it to me as something to write. And then over time, it sort of just became my own, and then Matt suggested that I direct it, and then the real journey began in a way, because the directing.
Matt Damon was going to play the lead originally, right?
Well, I mean, originally he was going to direct it. John Krasinski was going to play the lead. Then John got busy, and Matt was going to be in it and play the lead. Then Matt Matt asked me to direct it, and then he couldn't play the lead either. So then Casey played the lead. But
God, this is dizzying.
But this happens all the time. I mean, this is not unusual. People's schedules change. It takes 6 months or a year to set up a movie. You start pre-production 8 to 16 weeks beforehand. So it's like you get kind of used to this happening. It's not like it's got to be this one person or it's never going to happen. You get kind of inured to the idea that the personnel will change over time, and then once the role is inhabited by an actor, especially someone as spectacularly good as Casey, you can't imagine anyone else doing it. But when you're starting out, you're a little more like just trying to put all the pieces together and see you put the best pieces you can find together, and there's different combinations out there until the decisions are made.
It's actually not that unusual. I mean, in my experience, there's always about 25 different combinations of people that are going to make a movie before you get the chance to do it. It's always like, so-and-so is going to do it. We're all very excited. He fell out. And then someone else was going to do it, and they loved the idea, and then he was unavailable. Now you're going to do it, Casey. And so that's sort of, that doesn't seem that unusual. That's sort of how movies are hard to get made, and so it's always like sort of different recipes before the thing gets baked. But in this case, it was rather quick. Yeah, I guess Matt wanted to direct a movie and very wisely called the best writer around and asked Kenny to write it for him. And he said, I want it to be about a guy whose nephew dies and he has to take care of him, as I understand it. And then Kenny went off and wrote kind of his own thing. I mean, if you know Kenny Lonergan's writing, this is very much a Kenneth Lonergan original. And so... and then Matt didn't want to do it, and then Kenny asked me to do it, and then we were making it. And it ought to have been much harder than that, because it's hard to get these movies made these days for whatever reason. There's a lot of great TV happening, and movies are bigger spectacles, and so you'd think that this would have been, we would have had to have 100 bake sales to get financed.
No, well, thank goodness it did.
When they came to you with this, did you spark to the themes of it or the idea of it right away? Or how do you decide that you're going to come in and actually write the script and direct it and make it your own?
I just really like the idea. I like the idea of someone like this character who's bearing this much emotional distress, trying to do his best and showing up and trying to do his duty by his brother and trying to take care of his nephew, even though it's almost impossible for him to do so. And I just found that situation to be very moving and compelling. And, and you start, there's always a starting point, and then it builds and builds until it kind of gets its own momentum. And in a way, like, they told me they wanted to set it in Manchester, and I'd never been there, so I said, great. But I had been to Gloucester, which is about 20 minutes away. And once I started researching the town, by this, I was very quickly just on my own. They essentially dropped in my living room and said, "Do you want to write this?" I said, "Sure," and then I didn't see them for 2 years.
They left town and said, "Fine, he's got it now. Let him figure it out."
Yeah, and then except Matt stayed on as producer to make sure that everything was done in a very supportive, creatively supportive environment, and he helped secure the financing from Kimberly Stewart, who's our wonderful financier producer. But I think it just, I forgot the question.
Well, you're just saying the themes of it and what appealed to you in terms of actually sticking with something like this when you have to spend 1, 2 years, 3 years, however many times it takes to make a movie.
Yeah, it's funny about the themes. I think more in terms of the characters and the specifics and the particulars and of the physical environment and of the emotional environment, and then the themes are sort of somewhere in the back of my mind, because if I try to bring them too far to the front, then it becomes it loses the life for me. It's not like living people.
So it's the characters that drive you, and
oh, yeah.
So I've got to ask you about Lee, which is he's such an interesting character because he's not an obvious audience favorite when he comes on the screen here. And this is a complicated character.
Yeah.
So what is it that makes you want to write these kind of people?
It's very hard to answer that. I mean, people say the subject chooses you. You don't choose the subject, and I think that's pretty accurate. There's a lot of things I'm interested in, but there's not all of those things are things that I end up being able to write about or direct a movie about. And I just found him to be, the more I thought about him and what he was like and who he was, the more interested I got. And then just expanding from there, just thinking about Joe and the relationship with his brother and then the life they have. And then, you just putting in the characters. And if you don't have a really vivid idea for a character, you sit down and kind of try to fish around till you find one, and you end up kind of being guided by your own unconscious. It's almost as if the story's inside you trying to get out, and all you're doing is trying to open up avenues to let that happen. And then afterwards you can look back and analyze, oh, this scene goes with this, and this idea is carried through here. And, there's a lot of caretaking in this movie, and there's a lot of loss of caretakers in this movie. I didn't set out to say, I wasn't thinking like, oh, caretaking, that's a theme I want to write about. I thought like there's a guy shoveling snow outside a building and he won't talk to anyone. And I was like, that seems kind of interesting. And like, why won't he talk to anyone? And like, what's going on behind this guy who is so out of joint with everybody? And then so it works more like in those kind of baby steps, but those are much more solid ideas than like thematic ideas, which sound big but actually end up meaning nothing when you're trying to, put something together.
You work with this wonderful cast, and casting this film, and Casey Affleck, who's so far pretty much run the board in terms of acting awards this year for this. And I know he was very involved in the character, in the development of the character with you, and you spent a lot of time before the cameras ever rolled in developing this. Can you talk about that in relation with the character?
Yeah, we did. I mean, once the script is written, then it's time to give it to the actors and the collaborators, the cinematographer, and everybody else who's going to come in and make the movie with you. And the first and most important group of people is the cast. And Casey, as soon as he knew he was playing the part, started calling me up and asking me questions about why does he do this, why does he do that, why doesn't he do that? Can you explain this? Not in a critical way, but he really wanted to know. And so you write it somewhat on instinct, and you don't always have an answer.
This was a months-long process, though.
This went on for a year, yeah. But it's fun to do, and we both really had a good time because we both asked a lot of questions of each other, and we both had different answers, and we kind of went through the whole, Guy behaves in an odd way, and he's carrying around a tremendous burden. But he said to me, how come I do this why do I yell at him in the car if I'm I said, because I don't think it's easy to keep the kid at a distance. Right. You can keep a doctor at a distance, you can keep the tenants at a distance, keep your boss at a certain distance, you can not respond to a girl that you like who's trying to talk to you, but the kid is like in your face and you love him and you can't, and he's in distress and you can't, your technique breaks down when you try to hold him off, and he's very persistent. And he said, "Okay." So we, and this is just my half of the conversation. Naturally, I only remember my great ideas, but you can just see in his face the work he's doing all the time to just get through these scenes with whether they're easy. It's easy for him to do it or difficult, and nobody else knows what he's doing. It's a very complicated thing he's doing, and I think it's just great. But it's easy for me to say. He's the one who has to do it.
It seems as if. I mean, every actor is different, and every actor's techniques are different. To put yourself in that headspace for, as you say, for several months, has got to take a lot out of you, I would think.
Yeah, it does. It's hard, but that's sort of it's the best kind of hard work that there is, because I love acting, and when you get a part that's really hard, it's kind of then you get to do some real work. And if you get these parts that don't ask anything of you, you don't get to do very much, and you wonder what you're doing this all for. And it's hard, but it also gives a lot back. It's sort of like that great feeling. I've done a lot of different kind of jobs, and the best feeling, at the end of the day was when you got a lot done and you did a lot. And so that's kind of what it was like doing this movie. Is you just you go there and do some scene, and you got to cry or be depressed or upset or do a big bar fight, and at the end of the day you feel like, well, I did something.
And what do you look to in this case your director is also the writer, Kenneth Lonergan.
Yes.
And what do you look to him for feedback, for as a sounding board, for what kind of advice, if any, are you seeking day to day, hour to hour as you're working?
I like to torture the directors I work with a little bit, and I feel like if I have to be going through it all, then they should too. They put me in that position. So I would ask him questions endlessly until he would graciously answer them patiently, all of them, with great answers. He's a really smart, very good director, and he really likes actors. And I thought I found somebody who liked to talk about the scenes and the different possibilities as much as I do. But then I realized that even he had a limit, and he would say, like, enough, okay, enough, let's just do it. So I would ask him about, what if I played it this way? What if I did it that way? What if I yell at the kid? What if I don't even look at the kid? What if I do this? And And because that's the fun part for me. So we rehearsed for a few weeks before we started the movie.
Which is a luxury, really.
Which is a luxury, yeah. And then we were off and running. And once the clock starts ticking on an independent, low-budget movie like this, there really isn't a lot of time. And it's just go, go, go. And so, I had prepared for months on my own, and then I prepared for a couple of weeks with Kenny and the other actors a little bit, and then it was off to the races.
Man.
The structure of the screenplay, did you always write it with that idea in mind, that it was going to be that complex, that it was going to go back and forth, and the audience is not going to quite know what's going on with this character when they start viewing the movie? Or was it linear, it starts here, he's married, he's happy, and then it moves on?
The first draft was linear and bored me to death, and I couldn't get through it. And so after about 6 months of trying it that way, I threw out everything and started over with him shoveling snow, which I liked.
Yeah.
But I had written quite a lot of the backstory as it then came to be, and started slotting it in as he goes home, which made sense to me. And then, and then in the filming and in the editing, it became obvious that this was really the way to go. And where the flashbacks fit in, I worked on really hard in the script, and so they pretty much landed in the right place. And then just filming them like it was a question of, we decided not to shoot it in a different, not to shoot it in black and white or sepia tone, not to make a difference between them was a conscious choice between, that we made during the shooting, and really just we muss his hair up, and he's just got, but all the characters are just different people. Michelle and I talked a lot about Randy in the past and Randy in the present, and how she's just got this house full of kids and this nice, happy, rough and tumble marriage, and she's just not going to do her hair. And then she's just too comfortable to worry about how she's, I figured she's like, Michelle's so great looking. I figured you're great looking and you don't give a shit whether your hair is up or down or what. You're sick in bed and you got 3 kids. You're not going to go in the bathroom and put your makeup on. And she was like, great. And then she came up with this really brilliant idea of this very carefully put together look that she constructs after she's come back out in the world after this terrible loss, which I found was such a touching and beautiful idea that I really encouraged it. And we had all these back and forth. She would send me pictures of haircuts and coats and photographs she found in magazines saying, I think this is a good look. I think she's maybe trying a little too hard, but it's kind of her armor to go out there. And I thought that was just a great idea, so I really encouraged it and embrace it. But these are the kind of conversations you have with the cinematographer and the set designer or the production designer and everybody there. And that's kind of one of the really fun things about directing movies is you get to, all these people bring you these beautiful and complicated ideas, and everyone's kind of feeding into the same fantasy. And if it goes well, you get this wonderful result.
He's asking about the music essentially here and how you chose that.
Well, I really love working with music. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of putting the movie together because, you're in the editing room with the editor and you can pretty much drop in any music you want over the picture, and the difference the music makes to what you're watching is really incredible. I would put it as the number 2 most influential element after the acting. I would even put it before the cinematography, which is immensely important, of course, but just driving down the street, you try 10 different tunes and you got 10 completely different scenes, and it's scary almost how much it can do. So, but it can really be your friend. And I just put in pieces that felt right to me. I have to, not the most interesting answer, but I think what the music eventually did for me was create this sort of beautiful overtone to some of the scenes that are not so happy, like just this kind of cold, music is a little cold, it's a little bit light, it's very lyrical, most of the pieces we chose, and I think for some reason that element of somewhat detached beauty overlaying these struggling people seemed to me to be very resonant, rather than doubling on the feeling of the scene itself, kind of giving a little bit of a bird's eye view in an oral sense. Seems to me is what we ended up with, but again, it's almost like you're waiting to hear the tune that feels right, and then when you finish, you look back and you see you've picked 6 different pieces that are all doing kind of the same work in a way. And that beautiful piece that our composer Leslie, the pieces, those a cappella chorale pieces that Leslie Barber wrote, are just, you always drop those in the picture, and immediately they're clearly that's what belonged there.
You're talking about the location chosen here in Boston area and in Manchester?
Yeah, in Cape Ann. And, I mean, I had been to Gloucester a few times before, so I knew I had been there before, and it made a pretty big impact on me. I had not been to Manchester, but specifically, Manchester is the smallest of all the towns on Cape Ann. And it's a very wealthy community, actually, with a working class population that supports the bigger, the wealthier people who live there. They do the snow plowing and the lawn mowing, and they have a working port that freezes over in the winter. But there's a lot of back and forth between the different communities in Cape Ann, and I just learned a lot about it. And the more I learned, the more it wove itself into the screenplay. And one of the really fun parts of writing the script was, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say it doesn't seem like it could happen anywhere else, because it shouldn't seem like it could happen anywhere else by the time you're finished. Or it wouldn't be specific to it wouldn't be, there's no such thing as a general place. Every place has an identity and has this as a character. And just learning that Beverly has the hospital, Gloucester doesn't have one, and Gloucester has the hockey rink. And I didn't know that when I started, but learning all that gave me a lot of scenes. And one of the things that Lee is trying to do is take care of all these details. And I called up the guy at the Manchester High School to ask him all the questions that Lee asks the guy, and I talked to him, and that's where I got that character, by talking to the assistant principal on the phone. And so all these details that you learn as you're writing, if well, I shouldn't say you, but I really mean me. So if I'm generalizing, I'm just talking about me, because there's a million ways to make a movie. But the way I like to do it, or the way it seems to work for me, is to get the more real life you get in it, the less work you have to do in a way, and the more material you have, and it's just a gift that keeps on giving. And then you have this movie about this town that really seems like it's about the town, which is great. I mean, it's a great feeling for me when I hear people from the area saying it seems like the area, like we captured the area successfully. And it's not just me, it's the production designer and the cinematographer and the camera guys who went out and got all that beautiful footage while we were slaving away in the house with the scenes and the intensity and the acting and all that stuff. And anyway.
Where are you from?
I'm from New York City.
Okay, so how did Matt Damon, who was originally attached to this, as all of these things, and Casey, who are both obviously from Boston and that area, help you in these locations?
Man, they didn't do a damn thing.
No.
No, they helped me because they believed in me and were supportive and encouraged me, really. And they both have a very good bullshit meter, and they would have told me if I was way off, and I knew that. And Casey helped me by giving this incredible performance and by supporting me a lot during the shoot. He's very experienced on a set, and he really, it wasn't a horrible shoot, but it was difficult. It was a lot of, any movie shoot is tough. You have a schedule, you have the locations are moving around all the time, the weather, you're trying to make your days, you're in triple overtime, it's the middle of the night, you have this important scene to do. And Casey was just really good at being like, I know we've been here for 14 hours, but now the camera's set up and we're going to shoot the scene, and let's just make sure we're happy with it. Like, he would remind me why we were there quite frequently when I'd be like, I'm quitting, I'm going on the train, I'm going back to New York. I can't take it, I'm too tired. And he'd be like, listen, we're not working in a coal mine, this is a movie. And Matt was amazingly, I wouldn't have written the script the way I had or felt or directed the movie. I wouldn't have directed the movie if it wasn't for Matt, because I wouldn't have felt confident in being given the creative control that I require to give that much of my time and self to something. But I had complete trust that he would protect me creatively, and he did. So I was able to write the film as if it was mine from the beginning, and direct it with complete calm and relaxation that I'd be protected creatively under no matter what happened.
That's
and
cool.
Nothing happened that required that, but it was wonderful of him to do.
And he continues to in endorsing the movie in all the, unusually, the producer endorsing the film and all the television ads and everything, saying what an amazing achievement it is.
Yeah, no, he's really proud of the film, and and he should be, because he generated it, and he protected it and nurtured it, and and I should say the other producers did too. Kimberly Stewart really got behind the film, financed the entire thing. It's her first time she's ever produced a movie, and you know, when you write the check, that's when you start to get really anxious about what's going to happen with your money. So it takes a lot of guts to write a check and step back and trust that the people making the movie are going to do a good job and that you've made a good decision. It's really hard to do, and she deserves a lot of credit for doing it.
How much did it mean to you and your fellow actors to be on location, to be doing this in a small New England coastal fishing village?
Yeah, it's great. It would have been very hard to do it in Pittsburgh. You know, it was nice to be there because you could sort of look around and steal little details from the world around you, and also, you know, if you're there. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. If you can, I don't know, it sort of feels authentic. I know for people like Michelle Williams, you know, a big part of her process is sort of going around and seeing how people dress and how people talk and what do they, well, you know, how do they stand when they're holding their purse and their stroller and like what kind of jobs are those people doing? And she hung out with a lot of those women, and she couldn't have done that somewhere, you know, unless we were shooting the place we were supposed to be. And for me, I don't like being in artificial environments. I don't like being in a stage or being in a place where there's two walls, because that's the only place the camera's pointing, and then everywhere else is just a big black open stage and there's scripts and people walking around, and it doesn't feel like you're there. I'm not quite good enough to sort of just completely believe in the imaginary, and I sort of like, so I like to have the real environment around me as well.
Hey, so I noticed at the beginning of the movie you show Lee kind of through doorways and windows and frames and stuff, and I was wondering, is that a kind of a decision that you and Joni Lee Lipes had made to kind of create distance for Lee's character?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. I think, you know, I always had a pretty clear vision of the vision. I hate that word, but anyway, I had a pretty clear string of images in my mind of the beginning as being pretty anthropological or a little bit cold-blooded view of him from a distance. And in a way, you know, the shots could have even been a little bit wider, some of the outdoor shots. But yeah, the idea was just to kind of show him was to be a bit methodical at the beginning, and him methodically going through his day or his week and until he ends up in the bar and runs out of things to do and gets drunk and gets into a fight. And this is someone who's just using tasks to keep his distress at bay, and I wanted the film to have that kind of rhythm and have those kind of framings for the initial section. And then in the editing room, we discovered this amazing footage of Casey and little Ben O'Brien going out on the boat, which was so fantastic, and that became the beginning of the movie, and it was not in the script that way. The script starts with him shoveling snow.
Okay, so first he's asking about how long ago was the first meeting with Matt Damon in bringing this to you as a filmmaker?
I don't honestly remember. I'm going to say 5 years, because I know it took me about 2.5 years to write the script and about a year before that, when I finished the draft of the script that I was happy with. I think.
And how much an initial meeting with the characters and things was laid out to you in this?
A lot, but very little of it remained in this story that you saw. They had an idea for Lee that was, I thought, interesting, but he was kind of like the town oddball, and everyone thought he was a little weird. And I tried that for a while, and it just didn't do it for me. So I had to reconceive him completely. And their idea for Patrick was, and it would have been fine. I just couldn't write it that way. Nothing against their ideas, because if it hadn't been for their ideas, we wouldn't be here. But their idea for the kid was that he was a little kid, 10 years old, 9 years old. And I had already done a movie with a relationship between a grown-up man and his 10-year-old nephew. And I immediately thought it'd be more interesting if he was a teenager with a rich, full life and a lot going on. So you're kind of working that, so in a way, you're feeling your way through and trying to find out the choices that are preventing you from getting interested. And the town oddball thing just didn't do it for me, so I made him up to think. I just had a different image of him as kind of just a regular guy, like a solid, friendly, kind of a beer drinking boat fisherman, you know, and that suddenly woke me up. So I don't know if that answers. Anyway, so basically that's what. Then they had a lot of other ideas that I didn't end up using, but the core was certainly theirs.
Tell me about your working relationship with Lucas Hedges, the young man. He's awfully good in this film.
Yeah, he was not from that area, and I guess he grew up in Brooklyn. His father was a film director and writer, Peter Hedges, and so he kind of grew up on film sets, and they had a very different life than I had, and I think he was not someone. I don't know if he'd ever been on a boat or been, in a fishing boat, or been in some areas like that, like Gloucester, which is mostly kind of a working class town, and. But he jumped right into it, and he learned how to do the accent, and he was great. He was like one of those blow-up dolls you kind of hit over and they pop right back up. And I think that's the kind of quality that I wanted out of him, because I'm playing this character who feels so wounded. He's got this like horrible bleeding wound that he refuses to let anyone touch or heal, because he doesn't feel like he wants to be forgiven. He wants to hold on to this pain his whole life because he thinks that's what he deserves. He deserves it because he made a mistake. And so all this pain that he has, he's going to keep it. He's going to protect it and make sure that no one tries to forgive him, like Michelle Williams on the hill in that scene, when she wants to forgive him and say she's sorry and he should move on for his life. And the reason he walks away from that, and it's too painful, is because he doesn't want to hear that. And the reason that he keeps everybody else, like the doctors or the neighbors, he's so terse with them, is because he doesn't want anyone to get too close to him. Because on the one hand, he doesn't want to engage with people on a sort of emotional, friendly, personal level because it's too painful. But he also doesn't want anyone to try to make him feel better. But a 15-year-old kid who's your nephew doesn't obey. He doesn't. You sort of give him the social cues of like, leave me alone. Let me be miserable. Let me be tortured for the rest of my life. And he doesn't do it. He's like, I need a ride. I want to go see my girlfriend. Get in the car. I want a pizza. I want shit. I want it. And so that attitude, that beautiful, resilient attitude of this kid is what sort of starts to draw me out of my own misery.
How did you find him?
He auditioned, He auditioned 5 or 6 times because I was really nervous about casting anyone in that part because it's such a big part. And kids that age don't always have the chops that their peers have. And they clearly turn in beautiful performances. But, he's a New York City kid from progressive school in Brooklyn, and he's a theater family, and he's very sensitive and shy and full of feeling and nerves. And there's a lot about him that's not like that character, but he was by far the most fascinating one to watch. And it turned out that he added and built the characterization just beautifully. I mean, he turned himself into this scrappy, tough, persistent, pushy, friendly, 2 girlfriends, garage band, hockey playing brawler, and he's really this.
And added a lot of humor. And humor was so needed in this film at certain points.
Absolutely. And added a lot of humor and just does this beautiful job. So he's got but I think without the sensitivity, you wouldn't maybe be with him the whole time.
It's really terrifically cast, beautifully written and directed, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you all.
You have been watching the Landmark Theater's Q&A podcast. For further in-depth discussions with filmmakers, be sure to check out the other Q&As available on our channel from past films. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all our bonus content. Thanks for watching.